is welcome here. If you have been to the Bay Area Jewish Healing Center Azkarah Memorial Services in past months, or if this is your first time for joining us for this event, we welcome you. We welcome you all to this second Remembrance Circle for Jews of Color and Extended Family. We are gathering to respond to the profound losses Jews of color are facing as individuals in this moment and as a community, from the white supremacist violence and health disparities in pandemic, as well as the many forms of isolation surrounding our personal losses. We are also taking this time to honor the historic and ancestral wounds that are being unveiled in this time of profound transition. We are truly blessed to be joined today by these extraordinary spiritual leaders, Rabbi Meir Rivera, Kristen Eriko Posner, Paula Pretlow, and Denise Dautoff. To learn more about them, we invite you please to look at their bios in the chat. We are grateful to the Jews of Color initiative that made today's program possible. And at this time, with honor and privilege and regard, I would like to welcome Rabbi Meir Rivera, whose vision has guided us in creating today's event. Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi Eric. The thread of the nigun, a melody attached to the summoning of the angels, angels to my right, angels to my left, before me, behind me, and above. Rai, 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 yerai, rai, rai, yerai, rai, 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 yerai. If you identify as a Jew of color, a person of color, for whom the grief of loss of loved ones is magnified by pervasive systemic racism, if you're mourning the massive mounting death toll from the pandemic or climate change, if you are mourning one or more personal losses, recent or from long ago, may this space be a space of comfort. I bring a bowl of water with me for its containing and healing properties. Yarai, 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 yarai. And I welcome you to our stories of our ancestors, and we open our homes to you. Our Jewish prayer experience actually offers us a way to connect with our communal ancestors, our mothers and fathers, parents, Sarah and Abraham, Rivka, Rebecca, and Isaac, Rachel, Leah, and Yaakov. At the same time, we have this beautiful prayer called the Amida, and it creates an opening for us to remember each of our own individual ancestors. So friends, welcome, and do write in the names of your ancestors in the chat. My own ancestors, my great-great-grandparents who crossed seas and oceans from China and from Spain, great-grandma Lola Emilia Paula Josefa, Lola Ninay Catalina Oteiza, Lolo Andoy Alejandro Rivera, my mother, Dr. Aurora Rivera, my father, Bartolome Cabanatan, of blessed memory. And I pass memory on to Kristen.
To my great paternal grandparents who left their lives in Hiroshima, Japan to build better lives for our families as sugarcane plantation laborers on the island of Kauai. my paternal grandparents, Toyo and Sadao Kaneda, my paternal Ji-chan, Toru Namimoto, and Ba-chan, Fusaya Namimoto, who was sent from Japan to Hawaii in one of the many waves of Japanese picture brides, and my parents, Mariko and Jin Namimoto. I'm also thinking of my movement ancestor, Yuri Kochiyama, who continued to teach me what solidarity means long after her physical body has left this earth. I pass memory to Denise. Denise, I think you're muted.
Thank you, Kristen. To my Native and Mexican Indigenous ancestors, may you guide us on our journey and protect us as we know we are not alone. For my grandparents, Paula, Consuelo, Salome, y Paz, I pass memory to Paula.
Thank you. My ancestors, whose names I do not know, who were forced onto slave ships and brought here from Africa. For my indigenous ancestors, whose fertile native lands were stolen from them. For my grandparents, Pauline, Bert, Lorinda, Charles, and for my parents of blessed memory, Mary and Herman. I pass memory to Rabbi Mira.
And the memory contained in our Amida, this traditional prayer with a choreography that invites us to step 3 steps back and then 3 steps forward. I invite you now to find a way to embody that movement. You may have to stand and actually take 3 steps back and 3 forward. However you may want to step back and forward, come into this new ancestral home we are creating today, this evening, as we bring in our biblical ancestors and all their generations, those whom we cherish and wish to hold here and now, in this sacred moment, in time and space. Traditionally, the evening Amida is said in silence. We come in quiet awe and we listen.
So today, I brought with me my paternal grandmother's juzu beads. They're Buddhist prayer beads, and I imagine that she used them to pray through wars, through family deaths, through times of scarcity, and also in times of joy and in celebration. While the strings are frayed, I don't know if you can see them, but there's little frays everywhere. I imagine that these juzu beads are infused with her prayers, which give me great comfort. I carry them with me during sacred moments, like today, and whenever I want to feel her presence with me. When Rabbi Mira asked me to bring an object that anchors me, these juzu beads were actually not the first thing that came to mind. The first thing that came to mind was actually an object that is no longer in my family. I'm 4th generation Japanese American on my dad's side, and I've spent a lot of my adult life trying to put back together the pieces of my heritage. My dad grew up in Hawaii post World War II, which is to say post Pearl Harbor and post forced incarceration for West Coast Japanese American families. Out of necessity, my family assimilated very quickly. When my grandmother came over to the mainland from Hawaii in the 80s, she burned a lot of her belongings. One of those items was our family koseki, which is essentially a family tree or family record. And after my bachan, when she was already gone, I set off on this quest to learn more about my heritage and my lineage. And I was so sad to learn about the burned koseki. When I asked another relative why my grandmother would have burned something so precious, she said she didn't think anyone in our family would be interested in something like that. I've been searching for answers ever since. The grief of losing ancestors, the keepers of family stories and names, is profound. For immigrant families like my own, more of our precious heritage is lost with each generation. The trauma of assimilation can accelerate until one day, all we have left is our food. But I believe it is our birthright to learn about our heritage and reintroduce the parts that resonate in our lives today. It's a beautiful way to honor our ancestors who are always with us. It is my great honor and pleasure to introduce our next guest, my dear friend, Paula Pretlow. Paula was on my Beit Din on the day I chose Judaism and was there cheering me on the day that I became Bat Mitzvah. It is my great honor to continue to build and be in community with you, Paula, in times of joy and in times of grief.
Thank you so much, Kristen. You mean as much to me as I mean to you. I brought today this ring in memory of my grandmother, a ring like one that was given to her by one of her daughters, a ring whose origins are from Liberia, symbolizing family and friendship, and for me, the continent which birthed my ancestors. I also wear all the time this little Star of David. It's small. Those who know, know. Reaching for this, a reminder of my faith and values, and like my ring, a source of physical and tactile comfort for which I reach throughout the day. I think, I'm sorry, I got a thing up on my screen, excuse me.
It's okay, take your time.
I sink into the memories of my grandparents and my parents to find the strength and compassion to be a shoulder for others, and also to be open and transparent enough to share my own sense of loss and pain. I find comfort in the squeals of my grandson and the love of my children, who I'm so blessed to have physically nearby. I don't take for granted how lucky I am to have loving siblings and their families, with everyone safe and healthy. And having my Jewish community to wrap me up and let me know I am seen and I am heard, it's a soothing balm for my soul. The double whammy of COVID and brightest spotlight in a generation on racism has brought forth pain and hope. For me, the pain of the great divide between the haves and the have-nots, the pain of having been a have-not and knowing the consequences, except for the drive and hope of a single mother who refused to accept that her Black children would be defined that way. If we are willing to share our stories of pain and our dreams and hopes, we collectively will come to a place where we can see one another, not as other, but as individuals on this journey called life together. As Elie Wiesel said, the opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. The opposite of beauty is not ugliness, it's indifference. The opposite of faith is not heresy, it's indifference. And the opposite of life is not death, but indifference between life and death. I find healing through action, even when it's not the easiest route to take. There's nothing more Black, and there is nothing more Jewish. In memory of loved ones lost and hope to carry forward, I want to share this favorite poem that so many of you will already know. It's Epitaph by Merritt Malloy. When I die, give what's left of me away to children and old me that wait to die. And if you need to cry, cry for your brother walking the street beside you. And when you need me, put your arms around anyone and give them what you need to give me. I want to leave you something better than words or sounds. Look at me, look for me in the people I've known or loved. And if you cannot give me away, at least let me live on in your eyes and not in your mind. You can love me most by letting hands touch hands, by letting bodies touch bodies, and by letting go of children that need to be free. Love doesn't die, people do. So when all that's left of me is love, give me away. And now I pass on to Denise.
Thank you, Paula, very much. That was beautiful. So during this time of social distancing and social upheaval in the US, a time of reimagining how to gather in community, I am reminded that the beauty of tradition comes from a feeling of belonging and togetherness, which can change and adapt over time. As a Mexican American native Jew of color, I feel a sense of pride when I reflect on many parts that make my story and my identity whole. My family history, the traditions I was born into, the traditions I learned and adopted as my own, and the treasured lessons and moments I now share with my beautiful daughters. Knowing that there is room to adapt and change while we honor our traditions, even though the most difficult times reminds us how much room there is for complexity in Jewish identity and for inclusiveness in Jewish community overall. As a child, I was constantly surrounded by family and community. My strong sense of community came from more than just the love of my culture. It was also a way to survive. A long and painful history of racial exclusion was, in many ways, the backdrop of my childhood and family in our small town. My grandparents, both Mexican repatriation survivors, eventually returned to the US as teenagers and worked their way to our small agricultural community on the California coast. Their diligent field labor was relied on by produce growers who grew wealthy from the availability of low-wage immigrant workers and ideal climate conditions for large-scale production and high-profit crops. And yet, de facto racial segregation, discrimination, and explicit racial hostility towards Mexicans limited our access to safety, opportunity in our schools, employment, and our housing. Unfortunately, in many communities, COVID has shown us how, though progress has been made towards racial justice, there is still so much left to do, and too many communities of color continue to struggle for safety and opportunity, facing the highest risk of contracting the virus and experiencing its worst impacts. I am very proud of my Nana and how my grandmother worked her way from field labor to the canneries, enabling our family to establish roots in our town instead of moving seasonally to follow harvest patterns, as well as my mother and her generation, inspired by Chicano student movements who pushed for reforms to improve our schools and policies that harmed them, including corporal punishment for students who spoke Spanish in class. And yes, my mother got hit often. And still, the growing presence of Mexican families like mine, however beneficial to our economy, is still met with increasing hostility. In this moment of collective loss and grief due to COVID-19 and how it has disproportionately affected communities of color, as well as the racial injustices and inequities that exist due to systematic racism, forced me to reflect inward on the strength of my ancestors and our collective power we have as a community of color. This object I have here is a traditional molcajete made of volcanic rock, a tool that was first used by the Aztecs several thousand years ago to prepare food. A molcajete is still used today in traditional Mexican cooking to prepare ingredients and combine flavors. It was passed down to me by my nana, who often shared her love of family and community through the wonderful meals she would make for us. To me, this object symbolizes strength, tradition, culture, love of family, warrior of hands and hearts, and of our children. This molcajete here, for me, lifts up my Nana's memory and all the memories of times we were together. It lifts up my ancestors and takes me back home. Along with this object, I want to share a quote from Gloria Anzaldúa that stood out to me because of how it encapsulated so much of what I've been reflecting on when I began to reflect on my own story. On Writing as an Act of Resistance and Communal Care by Gloria Anzaldúa. Why am I compelled to write? Because the writing saves me from this complacency I fear. Because I have no choice. Because I must keep the spirit of my revolt and myself alive. Because the world I create in writing compensates for what the real world does not give me. By writing, I put order in the world. I give it a handle so I can grasp it. I write because life does not appease my appetites and hunger. I write to record what others erase when I speak, to rewrite the stories others have miswritten about me, about you, to become more intimate with myself and you, to discover myself, to preserve myself, to make myself, to achieve self-autonomy. Finally, I write because I'm scared of writing, but I'm more scared of not writing.
Yai, yai, yadai, dai, dai, dai. Yadai, dai, dai, dai. Yai, yadai, dai, 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 dai. Dai, yai, la, da, dai. Clavelito, 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 clavelito. Estrella de la mañana, claro lucero del día. Como no me despertaste cuando se iba el alma mía, mariposa, mariposa, mariposa.
During this time of great collective grief, we would like to share some images that reflect the deep grief of our Jews of color communities, that reflect the deep grief of our Jews of color communities have experienced for the past few months. From gun violence to state-sanctioned violence. Instead of sharing audio, we pair these images with silence to honor those whose lives were taken from us and to represent the silence our communities are all too familiar with.
clavelito, 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 clavelito. A little carnation flower, estrella de la mañana. The star of the day, claro lucero del día. Como no me despertaste cuando se iba el alma mía. Why don't you wake me up? Mariposa, mariposa, mariposa. Butterfly, fly away, butterfly. It is upon us. We say, Aleinu, it is upon us to bring our worlds together, to bring this that we hold to all worlds possible. Joining all mourners and those observing a yard site for Kaddish, we invite you to use the chat box to enter the names of those whom you are remembering. And if it is your custom to rise, please rise in all the different ways we are able to rise. For mourners Kaddish. Yit gadal beyit kadash shemei rabba. Be'alma divra chirutei. Be'yamlich malchutei. Bechayechon ubiyomechon. Ubechayei dechol beit Israel. Ba'agala ubizman kariv be'imru. Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabba Mevarach le'alam ule'almei almaya. Yitbarach ve'yishtabach ve'yitpa'ar ve'yitromam ve'yitnaseh. Ve'yithadar ve'yit'aleh ve'yithalal. Shmei dekudesha berichu. Le'ela min kol birchata beshirata. Tush bechata benechemata da'amiran be'alma be'imru. Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shmaya. B'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael be'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav. Hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tebel be'imru. Amen. May the source of peace bring peace to us all people Yisrael, all God wrestlers, the people Yisrael, and to all who mourn, and those who agree, we all say, Amen. We say, Tenchamu min hashamayim, may you find comfort in the heavens. Comfort, comfort. And as we peer through each other's windows, we see each other. Indeed, the life breath of each and every human being here is the lamp of the eternal, revealing all its inner depths within. In Midrash, it is said that the Holy One, blessed be, beckons, invites, and says, If you light my lamp, I will light yours. And sometimes that flame reaches higher and it's fanned by a wisp of winter air through a crack in the window, but the braided wick steadies the flame. From head to toe, I may sway, but I'm tethered to where I plant my feet. So, friends, from the 15th of April of this year and to today, 2 remembrance circles for Jews of color and our extended families, for personal loss and then for our collective losses. We gathered with our host, the Bay Area Jewish Healing Center. We cried, we reminisced, and we resolved. May this be a beginning for many of our communities. From here on, may Jews of color co-create these windows of witnessing on this hallowed ground of healing, virtual though it may be, with our new friends at the Bay Area Jewish Healing Center.
Thank you, Rabbi. On behalf of the Bay Area Jewish Healing Center and the rabbis who are with us in this Zoom room, Rabbi Elliot Kukla, Rabbi Natan Fenner, and our dear Aubrey Greenspan, who is supporting us with technology, we thank you from the bottom of our hearts for joining us today. We are here to offer support around grieving, illness, and dying should you need us. The Healing Center is honored to be a part of this experience. Thank you for being with us and making us more whole. Rabbi Mira will bring us home with a nigun.
So a nigun starts off sometimes as a wordless tune. This one beckons the angels. Right? It is said that we are created in the image of the divine. The divine to my right, the divine to my left, the divine before me. Lai, 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 yai, lai, 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 yada, lai, 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 yada, yai, lai, 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 yada, lai, lai, yada, lai, 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 yada. Yai, rai, 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 lai, rai, 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 yada, rai, 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 yada, rai. Yai, yai, yadai, la, rai, 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 yada, rai, 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 yada, rai. You got it. I'll start and then you repeat. Yai, rai, yai, rai. Yadai, dai, dai, yadai, yai, dai, dai, yadai, yai, dai, dai, yadai, dai, dai, yadai, dai, 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 yadai, yai, yai, da, dai, da, dai, yai, dai, yada, dai, 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 yada, dai. Yai, da, ya, dai, da, da, yai, dai, ya, da, dai, 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 ya, da, dai. To my right, an angel of love. To my left, an angel of strength. Before me, illumination. Behind me, healing. Above, divine presence, Shekhinah. Yairai, 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 yairai. Janice says, thank you for the opportunity to join together in a most meaningful gathering. Thank you to each who shared their family story. To my teacher, Sabrina Sojourner, thank you too for sharing your love. And Rabbi Elliot, who has been my companion all of these weeks, these months, thank you. Honoring the transgenerational fullness that brought each of us here. Thank you for being with us, says Kristen Eriko Posner. Everyone, such an honor to grieve with you and be with you tonight. May this be a beginning of many more.
Amen.
I turn this over to my sister Avra.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Mira. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us today. It has been a great honor to be here to provide a container for all of this beauty and this caring and this love, and a container for grief, because grief shared means grief somewhat diminished. So thank you all for joining, and I send you on your way. Baruch atah b'vo'echa u'baruch atah b'tzeitecha. May you be blessed in all of your comings and in all of your goings.
Amen de
Lehitraot.
amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Amen.
This is just us, I think.
Yes.
Yesher koach, everybody. Oh my gosh.
Jacoa.
That was so